So today we're going to go over step 5 of leveling up your first aid care and capabilities. Now, the way we like to organize this is we're separating it, or essentially you can look at it as being the first aid portion of a CPR, AED, and first aid class. Step 5, or box 5, which is major, minor illnesses and injuries, is essentially, like I said, that first aid portion of the class. In my experience, and I'm sure the same with you, is that time is precious. We don't have a lot of it. So in a lot of first aid classes, the major, minor illnesses and injuries, your chest pain, your shortness of breath, your stroke, allergies, heat and cold illnesses and injuries, seizures, and so many other aspects. I mean, tooth injuries, nose bleeds, head bleeds, things that are more minor and possibly major in nature don't really get a lot of attention. And most of all, what we don't really have happening in these classes is actually doing what's called a medical assessment or a trauma assessment, or assessing somebody who is sick and assessing somebody who is injured. There are specific questions we can ask a lot of people who are very sick or who are, say, exhibiting stroke symptoms or chest pain. And while we may not be able to do much for them with hands-on care, we can do a ton of work for them if we ask some very simple questions, and that information then is relayed to the higher medical authorities, the higher medical care, such as with a stroke. You know, what was the onset of symptoms? What were the symptoms that you saw that person exhibiting when you first made contact with them? So we really shortchange ourselves and people in the community with the number of strokes and chest pains and minor and major illnesses and injuries that we have occurring. We really shortchange ourselves and our communities by not really taking time and focusing on that, which is why with my family's first aid, we've separated those. Now, we teach first aid, CPR, and AED, choking relief, all as one class. We also teach CPR and AED as a class on its own with first aid by itself. But once again, where we're coming up short is the repetition or continuing education of those assessments. So what we've done is, once again, that 5-step approach of these 5 boxes. We're in box 5 now at the end of it. So understanding major, minor illnesses and injuries. What are those? How do we really assess and question? How do we fill that gap from identifying that first aid situation to higher level of care? What can we do for that person who may be having a seizure, who may be having a diabetic emergency, who may be having some trouble breathing, who may be having a stroke? Those are things that are very stressful, but we really don't train or teach people to how to really handle them. So once again, when we go back to that fear that inhibits people from stepping in, we want to educate ourselves to box 1 and 2, which is pre-hands-on care, right? We're legally protected with the Good Samaritan laws. We abide by, as long as we abide by the stipulations of it, right? We know that we've been educated if we've sought education through CPR, AED, and first aid and other first aid training. And that gives us the confidence to evaluate whether we can safely step into that situation or not. So once again, somebody having a stroke or having trouble breathing, there may not be a lot we're physically doing, such as putting on a tourniquet for a bleed or chest compressions for CPR, or something where we're actually putting hands on and providing care. We're simply talking to a person and providing some comfort, and that can be very stressful. So the way we structure our box 5, or our tasks in box 5, is to understand what a medical assessment is, what an injury assessment, what's a rapid trauma assessment, what's a detailed physical exam, and that takes that education and then puts our hands to work. At the same time, there are a lot of questions that are specific to chest pain, shortness of breath, stroke, seizure, diabetes, burns, breaks, bleeds, and all of those things. It's overwhelming to talk about it, but once we break it down like we do in our class for major and minor illnesses and injuries, it really gives you a conceptual idea of how you can really box in some of these illnesses and injuries, ask these specific questions, fill that gap between of time with tasks between identifying that first aid situation and a higher level of care. Helps keep you oriented, helps you fight and work for a better outcome for that person, helps keep the people around you cool, calm, collected, and moving in a positive direction. For example, we were at church and heard a fall, looked over, and there were a bunch of people, some commotion around an elderly man. I made my way over there, and a few of the people were identifying themselves as, nurses, doctors, EMTs, and the things that were being said and done seemed very discombobulated. There wasn't much flow to it. And the one issue I saw that they were trying to do for this man who was looking like he was having stroke was trying to give him a bunch of water, just telling him drink water, drink water, drink water. And really, that's the last thing we should be doing for somebody who needs higher level medical care. One is giving them water. So when I stepped in, and gave some direction and some leadership, and just started asking specific questions and doling out and giving out responsibilities and things to do. It organized the situation, calmed everybody down, gave peace to his wife, and also stopped them from giving him water, which he didn't need. But it organized a situation. Now, all I simply did was ask questions, and eventually somebody brought the first aid kit. We took a blood pressure, we got a pulse, I did some other things, but really just having a conversation in a sense, which is just doing the assessment, right? We're asking questions of him, asking questions of bystanders and family. What's normal, what's not normal for him? How long ago did things happen? Has this happened before? So understanding that you can fill that gap in time with very specific tasks, and those could be just asking questions, right? And that's gathering information. That's going to be very pertinent to what we relay to the firefighters or EMTs or higher medical care. Also understanding that there are pertinent questions to chest pain, shortness of breath that we talked about. There are certain ways to assess broken bones, certain ways to assess bleeds, certain ways to assess trouble breathing, and there are very specific questions that go along with that. So we delve into that. The way we like to structure is there's about 20 different illnesses and injuries that we'll go over. We go into detail anywhere from about 5 minutes per injury or illness. Then we practice the assessments. We practice the assessing and asking those questions, and then relaying that information to somebody. We practice doing a detailed physical exam, say on a burn or a broken arm or an injury, and then we do practice doing rapid exams for somebody who may not be coherent, may not be able to speak. We need to assess very quickly for some very life-threatening injuries and a few very severe injuries or illnesses or signs that we can see to guide the rest of our care. So once again, box 5, we're tying up those 5 steps to leveling up your first aid care and capabilities. And in box 5, we've got major and minor illnesses and injuries. Once again, it's basically the first aid aspect, but we want to spend more time in the questioning portion, in the assessment portion, and then understanding each of these type of sicknesses or illnesses so that we can actually direct care and actually give better care or information to 911 so they can send the appropriate resources. Hope you guys liked the video. Give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Once again, anything you guys have a question about, place it in the comments. Thanks for your time and have a great day.